Freedom Fighter Radio coming to you live from the heart of the Great White North, the heart of the true North, strong and free. We are coming to you live from the Eastern Standard Time Zone. It's 2:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please share, share, share. We are about to start this broadcast in a few minutes. Like as usual, it's never been a better time to be alive. We are at the point of the historical timeline where the unbelievable and the believable are merging together. Things that we consider to be sinister, mysterious, and dark forces from the pit of hell that we thought were just mysterious and mystical are now rearing its ugly head, showing its fangs, its horns, its demonic tail, and showing itself as part of our daily lives in the modern day society. However, they are packaging this as, nothing to see here. It's normal. It's business as usual, unless we reject the devil, as the Bible said. Reject the enemy and he will flee from you. But what the tyrants and the technocrats are trying to acclimatize all of our freedom fighters is to believe that there's nothing wrong. These are all just normal, and don't resist. Just receive and accept. That's not what we're going to do, folks. We are going to fight. We are going to stand for our rights and our freedom. We are going to preserve our humanity. We are going to keep our bloods pure-blooded. We are pure-blooded humans. We are the sons and daughters of the King. We are the freedom fighters of our respective countries. This is Freedom Fighter Radio. I'm your host, Ordinary Joe. Let's get this show started right now.
Freedom Fighter Radio, what is up? Whoa!
Shout out to Freedom Fighter Radio and Joe. You're doing great work, brother, and I love it. All right,
always. Make sure you listen to the Freedom Fighter Radio on the Ordinary Show.
I'm on Freedom Fighter Radio on the Ordinary Joe Show. That's quite a mouthful. Yes.
Hey guys, this is Chris Sky. Listen to Freedom Fighter Radio. They're here today, back in the blue, and so am I.
Please consider supporting the OJTV production costs and be an insider member for only $3 a month. Go to patreon.com/OJTV Canada. Thank you for your continued support.
Canadians all across the country are sick and tired of the lies, the fear-mongering, and the hate speech they hear from the mainstream media. Download the free radio app, Freedom Fighter Radio. Click the link below, scan our QR code, join our mailing list, and get a free download of our Freedom Fighter Radio app only here on OJTV on The Ordinary Joe Show.
Freedom Fighter Radio coming to you live from the heart of the Great White North, the heart of the true North, strong and free. I'm your host, Ordinary Joe. Very excited to be connecting with all of our freedom fighters from coast to coast, USA, coast to coast, Canada, coast to coast worldwide. And I know we have a lot of listeners from the United Kingdom, from Singapore, from Australia, from New Zealand, but it is nighttime on the other side of the planet. But we are going to welcome them anyway, so that when the time zone comes around their side of the planet, they will be welcome with the voice of freedom, the community of freedom fighters worldwide. It's never been a better time to be alive because you and I can be part of this revolution of sort of knocking out a trajectory of a proverbial meteor, a proverbial what's another word for meteor? That big, comet coming hurling towards the Earth. All you need to do is kind of give it a little bit of kick, even a centimeter out of its tracks when it travels millions of miles. That tiny little deviation from the tracks that it's taken to hit the target will actually miss the target if we just kind of knock it a little bit off track. A little bit off track. That's how bullets work. That's how arrows work. That's how any high speed bullet, or what's another word that they use? Anything that has a high speed trajectory, you knock it off, even just a centimeter away from its track, it will not hit the target because that little side track will be magnified at the end of the destination. And that's what we are praying for. That's what we are hoping for, because we see a lot of things that's happening in our society, and they seem to be the tyrants, the technocrats, the social engineers seems to be heading their way. It seems that their agenda is rolling forth like a freight train that is hard to stop. That's true. There's a lot of evidence of those. But really, we have to look at what's going on in our society with the eyes of faith. If we look at everything around us with our physical or our human eyes, then we won't see what's happening behind the scenes. Because this is not just a physical fight. It's not just a political fight. This is not just a social, cultural fight. This is a spiritual war. And though in the present, in the physical, it seems like they're making very, very big headways. The truth is we are winning the spiritual side of this war, folks. And so that's why I'm always very, very excited to connect with you spiritually through the sound of my voice and through your spirit. Although we are all far apart from each other, I can feel in my spirit that you and I, the listeners of the Freedom Fighter Radio, and yours truly, and the Spirit, the Holy Spirit that guides me on daily broadcasting the truth and the red pilling operations that we do together. This is not just me speaking on the microphone to tell everybody what I think, but I believe that I connect with every single one of you in the Spirit, and all of us connected in the Spirit, we speak forth of the truth and the will of God, not only on earth, but in the universe. And I believe there is power in that, folks. I believe that you and I together, like how the scripture says, when 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, there he is in the midst of us. This is Freedom Fighter Radio. Let's get this show started. All right. So, folks, I've been talking about time and space these past few episodes. We're talking about a very famous quote from George Orwell, straight from his novel 1984. And I just posted the exact quote this past few days on many of our pages. And I haven't done it on Twitter, on Truth Social yet, but it's all around Facebook right now. And the quote goes like this, and this is the theme of our next few episodes on the Freedom Fighter Radio, because this is a key, I think, to many of the truth and many of the secret weapon that we have to win this war. Remember, do not be fretting, do not be discouraged when from time to time we lose a battle, because we have to zoom out and look at the entire landscape. It's not just one battle that we win. We need to win, and uh, we need to win the war. And sometimes winning the war, sometimes you have to sacrificially lose some battles. That's the nature of war, folks. And if I can bring your some of you know the story behind the Imitation Game. There's a movie, a Hollywood movie, uh, that tells the true story behind the Enigma machine during the Second World War. Maybe you remember what I'm talking about. Some of you probably don't know. So I'll give you a little bit of basic synopsis or basic understanding what happened during the Second World War. The the stealth war that was happening uh, behind the scenes, under the table, if you could say, or a war that is also a shadow war that is simultaneously happening during the Second World War that led to the Cold War. The Imitation Game book was the war that the Allied forces have waged against the Axis forces. Remember, the Axis forces were led by Germany, who were far advanced, technologically far advanced, and compared to most of the countries in both sides of the Second World War, Germany has an encryption ability to communicate with all of their submarines, to communicate with all of their warships, without the Allied forces knowing their moves, their actions. They are able to coordinate their war effort because communication is a very something that the Germany and the Axis forces. It is something that they were able to master and dominate using a technology called the Enigma machine. However, the Allied forces, what's his name again? The movie based on this story was the character. I'm trying to remember the name of the scientist. He actually invented the oldest, the archaic form of the computer. It's in the tip of my tongue again, as usual, folks, because we don't script this radio shows. We express all the thoughts and the insights here based on memory, based on the spirit and what the Lord deposits in our minds. If my brother David Carlson is tuning in sometimes, or probably he's busy at work right now, but he sometimes helped me kind of recall all the names of the people, historical people that I need to regurgitate from my memory. But anyways, the Enigma machine was um, spied on by another machine that a key person within the Allied movement, the Allied forces, scientist who's in the movie Imitation Game was played. The character was played by a British actor named Benedict Cumberbatch. You know what? So that I don't go in the dark, I'll just type on my DuckDuckGo here, Imitation Game, so I can remember the name of the scientist who invented the early forms of the computer to try and predict or decode. Basically, they were decoding the messages that they're getting from the Enigma machine. The character that uh, what's his name? Benedict Cumberbatch played, the character that he played in real life. The name of, all right, there you go, Alan Turing. How could I forget? So Alan Turing invented um, the earliest form of the computer. And again, the intention was to try and decode the messages that they are catching, that the Axis forces were sending back and forth from their headquarters to their submarines, to their warships, to their captains in the field. So, in a way, we could say that Alan Turing's effort to decode the messages from the Enigma machine so that they can consult with the generals of the Allied forces to know and to the actions, the what are the next plans, the actions, the next places the Axis forces would strike, the advances that they are planning against the Allied forces. Being able to decode the encrypted messages of the Enigma machine, the Allied forces was able to get on top of the game and predict ahead of time what was the moves of the enemy. But let me remind you, if you know the story, and this is a true story, and you can watch the film version of this story behind the imitation game, or the decoding, Alan Turing's decoding of the Enigma machine. You can watch this movie in many streaming platforms. I believe it's available in your most popular streaming platforms, Amazon or Netflix, or maybe in YouTube somewhere also has that. You can rent it, you can buy it. But this is a true story where when Alan Turing was able to build a machine with which he didn't know was the early forms of the computer. Again, we can say that the computer was accidentally developed for a different purpose, but now we use computers like almost taking it for granted. We have computers in our pockets in form of smartphones. Almost every occupation right now on Earth that requires admin stuff requires a computer. And the future of our the dystopian fourth industrial revolution revolves around the technology of a computer. The birth of the computer was during this time when Alan Turing was trying to decode the Enigma machine during the Second World War. And again, I will reiterate, in history, you could say that in the surface, the discovery or the development of the computing power or the computing technology of a computer was accidental, right? Would you guys agree? It's almost accidental. If you base it on the story of how Alan Turing developed that machine to decode the Enigma machine, I can't remember if he even gave a name. I think he named it, by the way, so full disclosure that Alan Turing was actually a homosexual man. But during that era in American or, Western society, most homosexuals are not as blatantly or aggressively pushing their agenda down people's throat like the way we are experiencing it in modern society. But during those society, they were the ones who were vilified, harassed. By no means I am validating homosexuality, because that is something I believe that is a sin unto the Lord, because I believe that God didn't create homosexuals. The Bible said that God created man and woman, and he created us in his image and likeness. He didn't create a gender in between man or woman. The Bible said that he only created men and women. However, we are also given grace by the Lord to, while not accepting the life of sin and the sinful agenda of the LBGT, the person who has been deceived to believe that he or she is homosexual, we have to win them over by love and tolerance, not acceptance of the sin, but acceptance of the person. Anyways, I don't want to deviate too far. But Alan Turing was actually homosexual. He was in love with a man, and he named his machine after the man he was in love with, who's during the time, actually, he was in love with a man that he met when he was a boy, preteen or teenage boy. And he always loved that man. I can't remember the name of the man anymore. I have to watch that movie again. But he named his machine, the computer, the early form of the computer, based on the name of that man. So that's why I'm just trying to reiterate that it's almost accidental when he developed the computer, the early forms of the computer. He doesn't even have a name for it. He named it after the man he's in love with, and also it was not created for the purpose of a future plan to create personal computers, big mainframe computers, or even artificial intelligence. That was not in the agenda in the early history of developing the computer. It was basically a defensive kind of technology. It was not planned out that way, that this particular technology will be used in the future. And right now, it dominates our entire society. The computer dominates our entire society, and the computer dominates our future. Having said that, however, I believe that the early history of how the computer was developed, regardless if Alan Turing and the Allied forces know what they are developing, I believe everything was planned out by the Lord. Because nothing happens in our world, in the present, in the past, or in the future, that the Lord, who is absolute power of all the worlds and all of the timeline, nothing happens in our history that the Lord did not permit. So I believe this is even the development of the computer that seems to be in written history, in documented history. It feels like this is all accidental. I believe nothing is accidental. Everything was allowed, or even probably planned, in the spiritual world. A lot of the manifestation of how we understand the present time, or the world we live in, this has been designed, and this has been planned out or blueprinted in the spiritual world. I totally believe that. So just a kind of refreshing what we've been talking about this past few days. It's all based on that George Orwell saying from the novel 1984, when it was uttered. This phrase or this quote was uttered in the book, which is, of course, attributed to the author of the book, George Orwell, the book 1984, where it was said that whoever controls the past controls the future, but whoever controls the present controls the past. This is very true, in my opinion. And this is very key with how we are going to win our war against tyranny. See, what the tyrants, the technocrats, the social engineers are trying to distract us from is the past. And what they are distracting us with is the present. Let me explain. So, like I said in previous episodes, I feel that there are a lot of members of our freedom community, our freedom fighters, fierce freedom fighters in the early, especially the first wave of freedom fighters in early 2020, when the folks, are you hearing me properly? I can see my level indicators are okay. Let me come closer to the mic. The early first wave of freedom fighters during the 2020 pandemics. Many of those who were quick and unhesitant to respond to the assault against our freedoms, they were early and they're quick and unhesitantly responded to the call to fight for freedom, to stand on guard for our countries, for our country here in Canada, and for their respective countries all over the world. Folks, give me a thumbs up in the comment section somewhere if my levels are okay there, because my visual indicator seems to not give me. Good morning, Sandy Summers. Somebody please come to the comment section and tell me if my levels are clear out there, because we're live today. This is not pre-recorded today. All right, so a lot of our brothers and sisters in the fights have already fallen off the wagon, because fighting for freedom is stressful. It's taxing, and it takes its toll sometimes if you have been fighting ever since. They introduced their agenda to lock us down, to mask us up, to vaccinate us. Those who are keen and observant, and they saw early the writings in the wall that this is happening, they stood up, they stepped up, many of them. But those who were early in this fight, many of them were already given up. I know many of them personally. I know many of them that I interviewed, and they already move in other countries because they totally feel that Canada has already totally fallen. Canada is a fallen state in their opinion. And, I don't blame them. I don't blame them. I'm just saying that I believe that's what happens when you are so focused on the day-to-day battle and failing to, from time to time, zoom out from your point of view and see the entirety of the landscape. When we're focused on local war battles, the local battles, analogy of using one of the traditional wars that we fought in the past. When you're so focused on this specific battle, you can die on that battle. But sometimes we really need to be a general of the army, or a general of whatever, Air Force or Marines or Navy, the top generals. They look at the entire landscape of the war. Their goal is to win the war, not just to win battles. And sometimes there are certain battles that they know they will not win. Nonetheless, they have to pursue that battle because it deviates the resources of the enemy away from the actual target. So systematically, positioning resources, positioning forces in certain theaters of battle, which they know they won't win. Nonetheless, it is an advantage for the entirety, the overall proposition of the war. Let me give you an example from that movie, Imitation Game. So when Alan Turing finally decoded the Enigma machine, and they were listening in, and they knew that the next move, so on the same day that Alan Turing and his team was able to decode the Enigma machine, they started listening right away, and they knew hours from the very first message that they decrypted. And they realized that the Axis forces are going to attack a certain fleet of battleships. What do you call battleships in the sea? Like, yeah, battleships, seafaring battleships. They knew that it was going to happen, and one of his team members, the youngest member of his team, this person's brother was actually in that ship that was planned to be attacked by the Axis forces. So of course, because his brother is on board, he wants to warn them. And I think this is one of the most dramatic part of that movie, when Alan Turing prevented him from sending out the warning. But he knew that if they don't get warned, everybody in that ship will die. But Alan Turing was thinking ahead. He knew that if they warn the ships that will be attacked, without trying to create a narrative of how they found out, or some sort of excuse for them to dodge that bullet. An excuse meaning creating a narrative where the enemy, the opponent, will not pick up on the fact that they already decoded the Enigma machine. Are you guys following? I'm trying my best to simplify and explain. I hope I'm doing a good job. I'm not sure, but I'm known for confusing listeners the way I explain things. But hopefully I'll do my best to explain it. So they knew that the Axis forces were going to attack a certain area in the ocean. One of his team members realized immediately after they decoded the message that his brother is on board one of those ships that is scheduled to be attacked by the Axis forces. He was about to call their leader, or even go directly to the generals in that fleet of seafaring warships. But Alan Turing prevented him from doing that. And he was so angry. And he accused Alan Turing of playing God. And if I was in his position, I'd probably do the same. I would probably, find a way to undermine Alan Turing. And Alan Turing was the team leader of the researchers, right? But if I was one of those members who I knew was able to predict what ships are going to be attacked, and one of my siblings is on that ship, I will do my best, try to undermine the authority of Alan Turing if I was in his team, and find a way to warn the captains of those ships in those fleet, so that they can dodge the bullet, right? I think you will too. And that is the most logical, the most reasonable way to respond to that situation. For sure. Nobody argues with that. But when you zoom out and you look at the entire landscape of the war, unfortunately, I have to agree with that move of Alan Turing at that time, preventing that member of his team to warn the captains of those ships that were about to attack. And they knew full well that if they don't warn them, most likely they will all lose their lives. And indeed, they did lose their lives. The lives of everybody on that fleet of warships in that particular region of the ocean. Alan Turing's reasoning is that if they don't create a narrative, some sort of excuse why the targets have left the area or was able to dodge the bullet, it will almost announce to the enemy that, hey, we know
what you're about to do because we already decoded your Enigma machine. So the element of surprise will be given up on that particular moment. So that is the most um, difficult part of that movie. That is the most difficult decision making in that part of history. And I bring that up because to complement what I was trying to say earlier, that we need to zoom out, that there are certain battles that we cannot win, but we have to fight it anyways. But there are certain elements of the war that we should not be stressed out, or we should have peace, even though in certain theaters or certain localities, certain battles of the war, it looks like we're losing, but we know we're winning the war if we zoom out and just kind of absorb and analyze the entirety, the landscape of the war. Before I continue, folks, I would like to remind everybody, because I keep on forgetting myself to remind everyone, that tomorrow night, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have a special guest on the show. We're going live with Chris Kai, or Christopher Sakosha, who is the freedom fighting candidate for the mayorship of Toronto. That's tomorrow, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on the Freedom Fighter Radio, only here on the Ordinary Joe. And I explicitly have expressed that I give my full endorsement and I stand behind Chris Sky, or Christopher Sakosha, who's running for the mayorship of this city. A lot of my friends give me a frowning face for standing behind Chris Kai, because yes, indeed, I did criticize Chris Kai a couple of times in the past, but at this time, at this place in our battle, this specific battle, right, we have to be forgiving of previous mistakes of some of our brothers in the fight. I give him my full endorsement because he is the only candidate in this current mayoral race in Toronto. He is the only candidate who has an opportunity to take our city away from the tyrants and give the city back to the people. He is the only candidate who can do that. So Chris Kai is our best choice for this particular election. And let me remind you, and this is a consensus among many big voices and leaders of the freedom community. The way we fight and the way we win against internationalist advances is fight it locally. And so I do believe that every freedom fighter, if you're able to, should throw your name in the hat, run for local politics, local political positions, because the politicians, the traditional politicians, they are the one who are driving our cities to the ditch. And we have to take the steering wheel away from these tyrants, these technocrats, who are purposely trying to drive our entire society down to the ditch. Folks, again, I have a visual indicator of my sound level out there. It looks like it's very, very weak. On my monitor, I sound like I'm very loud, but my visual indicator seems to show that my voice is coming out very weak. Please, one of you, please come to the comment section and let me know how's my level out there, if you can hear me well, or am I yesterday I was listening to yesterday's episode, and I discovered that there are portions of the episode that are garbled up. The audio was garbled up. All right, so that's my announcement for tomorrow, Wednesday, May 24th, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're live Q&A with Chris Sky here on the Ordinary Joe on the Freedom Fighter Radio. The format of the show tomorrow, I will have about 15 minutes of Q&A with him, and then I'll give him the entire 45 minutes to discuss his plans if he become the mayor, his mayoral plans, or his entire campaign speech, uninterrupted, and then we'll open the floor to Q&A with our live audience. That is the plan. So hopefully all of you will share. Sean Phillipson was saying loud and clear. Thank you, Sean. I just want to make sure because my visual indicator shows that I'm weak out there. But thank you. Thank you for verifying that's loud and clear. Appreciate that. So that's tomorrow, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I just want to get that out of the way because I keep on forgetting to announce that every time I go live. So today I was able to do that. So let's get back to our conversation. Today in this episode, I have two clips that I will be playing for you. First clip, of course, is our new segment with the professional insights of our brother in the fight, Mr. Sean Maves, who is also the title holder of Mr. Ontario back in the early 90s. He is the favorite guest in some American radio stations to give his insights on both physical fitness advice, health advice. Also, because he's a Christian, a brother in the faith as well, he also gives his comments, his thoughts regarding the technocratic agenda based on the scriptures. He is one of our resident advisors here on the areas of understanding 15-minute cities, smart cities, the agenda of the tyrants and technocrats to retrofit our cities so that it becomes smart cities. Remember when that pretext smart, or the not pretext, the whatever, I can't remember that, putting smart on everything: smartphones, smart cars, smart computers, smart bikes, all of these, the pre I don't know what's the word for it, but that thing that you put, the word that you put on every aspect of our life, smart grid. I think when they talk about smart city, that is the conglomeration of all the smart devices that talk to each other, like what we know about the Internet of Things, right? We heard of the Internet of Things, but they want to push this Internet of Things to another level, which is the Internet of Bodies, which includes biological entities to also be connected to the grid. So I think that's the idea behind the smart city, which is the original concept that introduces the new concept called 15-minute cities. So the tyrants, the social engineers, they come at us at all kinds of firing from all barrels. They're coming at us from all points, from the political to the technical to the technological, and it is a very complex war that we are in. But I think the way we win this is to be at peace, to be calm, and to know using a compass and trusting that compass. You know how pilots, especially in bad weather, where you cannot trust your eyes, you cannot trust your senses, your physical senses when you're flying a plane, because maybe the atmosphere that surrounds your plane are full of clouds or full of rain, or the visibility is low. These pilots, the best way that they can navigate is to trust their instruments. If they trust their senses, for example, their eyes or their ears, or the noises that they hear around, or their eyes, or their sense of like, am I upside down, or am I right side up, or am I banking left, banking right? When everything that surrounds you looks the same, or it's white out, how can you sense if you're on an incline, or you're already upside down, or your nose is pointing up, or the nose of your plane is pointing down? If you use your senses, you cannot tell. It's very difficult to tell. So pilots have to trust the instrumentations on their panel, on their dashboards on that plane. We live in this modern day age where everything that surrounds us are fabricated towards deceiving all of us to comply. All the fear mongering, all the gaslighting, all the fake news, all the fake narratives, all the effort to rewrite history, all the effort to brainwash people using television, using mainstream media, all the controlled opposition speaking on loud bullhorns, trying to win our hearts and minds. This is akin to being a pilot in the middle of a storm, or in the middle of a whiteout, in the middle of clouds. You almost cannot tell if the nose of your plane is pointing down or pointing up, or you're already banking left or right. You have to trust your instruments. And that's the endeavor that I'm trying to achieve with the series of our broadcasting this past few days and these next coming days, trying to understand the timeline that we are in by trusting the instrumentations. Learning from history is one of the instrumentations. Learning the lessons of history. Now, that is very tricky because there are so many historical rewriting that the tyrants and technocrats are trying to impose on us. And I give two specific examples on the last post. I was talking about how there are elements in today's society trying to rewrite, for example, key people such as Kary Mullis, the inventor of the PCR technology. There are elements in society trying to discredit him as the inventor of the PCR technology. Even though you can go to the official website of the what do you call that prize, the prize that people get when they make great inventions. It will come back to me a little later on, but he is the official, recognized among scientific communities. He is the official inventor of the PCR test, and he said that the PCR technology should not be used as a diagnostics, because when you use the PCR, reading the data from the swabs can be interpreted either way. You can find anything you want to find from a PCR test if you increase the cycle threshold. And that's what exactly Ontario did, and many provinces and states and countries all over the world. That's exactly what they did. as part of their pretext to fearmonger, to keep on daily fear mongering for people to comply, is to hijack the PCR testing debacle during those. And there are elements now they're trying to discredit that Kary Mullis is not the inventor of the PCR test. Same with Dr. Robert Malone, who is indeed, it's not the Pulitzer Prize. I'm trying. Okay, man. Sometimes, this is my challenge. Sometimes I can never write. I can never script my broadcast, folks, because I've tried it many times in the past. I would script my show, but I never stick to the script anyway. So what's the point of scripting the show? I just go with the flow as the Lord leads what to talk about. I have I'll tell you some of the things that I prepared to talk about right now. Because what we're talking about is the aspect, the wisdom behind the saying, he who controls the past controls the future. We are being deceived to take our eyes away from the prize by being inundated with all of the assaults and all of the advances of the tyrants, the technocrats, as they seem to be winning in the present. Meanwhile, because all of our energies and attention are on the present, we are kind of forgetting that they are trying to rewrite history. If we get a good control of understanding and grabbing a hold of information so that we can learn the lessons of history, I think the fight for the future lies in that battle. Understanding history and learning the lessons of history is key to win the future. The future is just around the corner. The future, the way we see the future with this technocratic agenda, is their transhuman fourth industrial revolution agenda, the Great Reset, the Build Back Better agenda, the sustainable development, and all of these. We can trace it in history to have a better understanding of the future. Let's take, for example, the Great Reset. One of the authors that I've been following recently, his name is Leo Zagami, who is actually an ex-Illuminati. He wrote the book, The Confessions of a Former Illuminati. And because he knows the inner workings of secret societies such as the Illuminati, he had a very good explanation how the Great Reset and Klaus Schwab and the Davos Group was actually born of the Club of Rome, which is a very strong tie with the Illuminati and the Vatican, and all of the future agenda that they are trying to roll out with us. They're gaslighting us and deceiving us that there will be a race of aliens that will come and land and reveal themselves in our society, like the way it is depicted in many science fiction movies, how an alien invasion with big motherships will arrive on our planet, and Vatican will be involved in welcoming them. And there are even cardinals, Catholic priests, who write books now about how they will welcome these outer space aliens, and even a book that was written that he said that he will baptize some of these outer space aliens when they arrive on our planet. He will baptize them to be part of the Christian Brotherhood. This is heresy. This is heresy, blatant heresy that is being shown in front of our eyes. We really have to wake up. But the way we are going to understand their actions for our future is to understand the past and learn the history, learn the lessons of history, And that's what that's why I want to talk about some of the hidden gems, the hidden information of history, such as, yes, the UFO, for example. It has been hidden on plain sight for 40, 50 years from the general public. But did the UFO concept or outer space alien concept, was this initially a science fiction concept that is now seeming to rear its ugly head and now being forwarded even by the Pentagon, even by NASA, even by the CIA, as now it is being disclosed as reality? Or was it reality from the onset, being co-opted and hijacked by Hollywood, by the CIA, by the Pentagon, by NASA, to retell the story and brand it as myth, as science fiction? And so yesterday, you can go back to the episode yesterday where I talk about the difference between myths, legends, and reality. Because the truth is, there are so many historical accounts that seems to be embraced as the real account, but they are skewed, and many elements of our official historical narratives have been hijacked by the tyrants, the technocrats. For example, the cataclysmic event of the 9000 BC, or the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. You can check it out. It is a real hypothesis that is now bringing the establishment archaeological community, the Egyptological community, the anthropological community. They are all in crisis right now because they have been covering up so much truth from history that now, because of modern technology and many ordinary Jane and Joe enthusiasts of archaeology and anthropology are now discovering a lot and unearthing many evidences that negates the official narrative. They are on crisis mode and they feel like, oh no, we got to get ahead of this narrative. Same with the UFO narrative. The Pentagon, they know that they cannot control the narratives anymore because everybody who are able to capture those images or those sightings, they cannot hide the fact anymore because everybody has evidences in their pocket. Everybody is able to quickly capture an image or a video of a certain phenomenon, and minutes later they can upload it for everybody to see on the internet. This is Freedom Fighter Radio. Folks, don't go away. We'll be right back after these short messages. Just because it's a seller's market, it does not mean that it's not a good time for you, the buyer, to get into your dream home. The seller's market presents a unique opportunity not available during the buyer's market. Find out for yourself. Get the professional advice of an experienced, honest, Christian freedom-loving real estate professional. Call my friend, our sister in the fight for freedom, Madam Cheryl Severance of Century 21 at 905-646-2121, or check out her website at cheryl-severance.c21.ca. Fund the truth. Fund the unacceptable fringe views of the Freedom Fighter Radio broadcast. Go to patreon.com/OJTV Canada and also donate $3 per month and help us keep going and pushing back against the lies, the hate, and the fear-mongering of the legacy media. Patreon.com/OJTV Canada. Your $3 per month will help us set fire on the lies of the tyrants, the technocrats, and the internationalist social engineers. Patreon.com/OJTV Canada.
Did you hear about the children's cough syrup shelf? They are mostly empty in the drugstores. Are you concerned? Do you feel the need to stockpile? As the world heads towards uncertainty, with every nation meeting its own challenges, Larks Medical are staged and ready to respond. Go to larksmedical.com. Provide them with your name, phone number, and email, and Larks will respond at their earliest possible availability to find solutions and ensure ample supply for your needs. Or email them directly at info@larksmedical.com. That's info@larksmedical.com.
I'm Pastor Arthur from Calgary, the leader of the Independence Party of Alberta. You are listening to the Freedom Fighter Radio Worldwide podcast, only here on the Ordinary Joe Show.
Immediately out! Immediately go out and don't come back!
Welcome back, folks. This is Freedom Fighter Radio, coast to coast to coast. I'm your host, Ordinary Joe. It's 3:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Welcome to the show. A little disclaimer there, our ad breaks with this is an old, I do not have the raw video yet, but the disclaimer, Pastor Art is not anymore the leader of the Independence Party of Alberta. He is now the leader of the Solidarity Movement Party of Alberta, because he was unceremoniously and undemocratically ousted from his democratically position as the leader of the Independence Party of Alberta. Like I said, the board members of the Independence Party of Alberta has been infiltrated by tyrants, technocrats, and social engineers, and they coup d'etat to kick out Pastor Art. But within 2 weeks, just before the elections, Pastor Art and many of those who support him, including I support him, but I don't live in Alberta. But many of those who support him in Alberta have now formed an official political party called the Solidarity Movement Party, which is also named after the Solidarity Movement that ousted the Soviet Union back in the 90s. So that's just a little disclaimer. That's an old video. I haven't replaced it yet because I haven't, gathered fresh footage, just so that, clarify, he is not anymore the leader of the Independence Party, but he is the leader of the Solidarity Party of Alberta. So, folks, welcome back to the show. We were talking about how those who control the past controls the future, and those who controls the present controls the past. The way we can alleviate all the stress of the present and the deception of the present, how many of these tyrants, technocrats, and social engineer makes you and me want to believe that they're actually winning the war in the present. We know that it's not true. It's a deception. It is gaslighting. We are actually winning this war because we know that we're winning it in the spiritual world. This war, when it's won in the spiritual world, it is going to be won in the physical, the political, the social, the cultural world where we live in. And I am confident about that. Because we are in this mini series of talking about the past, the present, and the future, we need to be able to zoom out and zoom in. And in the next coming days, I'd like to talk to you about some of the hidden artifacts of history, such as the builders, the lost civilization that built the megaliths, the pyramids, the Göbekli Tepe, which is unearthed just a few years ago, that shows evidence of that brings many of the members of the archaeological and anthropological, Egyptological communities, because they have an agenda, they have a dogma that they are holding fast in, and they are protecting their official narrative. And one of those official narratives that
the establishment are trying to protect is the narrative of the Darwinian evolutionary theory of man, which uh, fails, very, very miserably fails, if you account for many of these new findings, new evidences of a cataclysmic event that happened about 1200 years or 12,000 years ago, or 9,000 years BC. I believe it's 10,600 to 12,800 BC is many archaeological evidences are coming forward that there was a big flood. There was a big flood. And this is another thing I want to talk about. That particular topic is within the archaeological community or the unbelieving community, those who wants to vilify the writings of the Holy Bible, right? A lot of their questions right now and a lot of debate and the infighting that's happening in this community, their questions can be answered very, very simply if they just believe what the scripture says, that the Lord have asked Noah to build an ark. The Lord asked Noah to build an ark, and that ark, all the survivors of that cataclysmic event was in that ark that Noah built in obedience to the commandments of the Lord. But a lot of this, it's funny when I watch a lot of these people who are fighting within this community are fighting each other, trying to explain away how all the megafaunas died but humans survived. How could that be? Unless they embrace the truth, which is God have ordered Noah to build an ark, and everybody, all the animals, all the people who were in that ark were saved. That's why they restart the great that was the great reset. That was the great reset that allowed for people to survive and restart society. And we all belong to the genealogy of Noah because they are the people who survived that great cataclysmic event, the great flood. But folks, we are going to fast forward in the future while we talk about the past so that we can understand the present. And one of those futuristic agenda that many of our freedom community members know are the agenda of the smart cities, the 15-minute cities, the great reset of Klaus Schwab and the Davos group types. So today we have on our this is part of our daily broadcast. We don't have a name for this segment, but for now we'll call it the 15-minute city segment of the Freedom Fighter radio show. We have an expert on this subject matter, which is Sean Maves, an active urban planner. Right now, he works in the industry of urban planning, and he's been in that industry for almost 40 years. And people in that urban planning industry have insights on all this smart city agenda, all this 15-minute agenda, 15-minute city agenda, the smart grid, the smartphones, the smart meters. All of these can easily be explained by our expert on the panel or expert on this segment. So let's bring in Mr. Sean Maves, who will further explain to us what's going on in their plans in the future dystopian tyranny that they're trying to roll out. So without much further ado, let's welcome Mr. Sean Maves to the show.
And all of this dystopian sinister agenda of the internationalists. And with our morning shows, we have been bringing a friend in who is a brother in the fight, but also a brother in the faith, and who happened to also be an urban planner here in the city of Toronto. Sean Maves is an occasional guest on Fox News Radio affiliate KARN 102.9 FM from Little Rock, Arkansas. He's also a frequent guest at the WDCX Christian Radio from Buffalo. And he's a guest on other U.S. Canadian TV radio stations, also as an urban designer and a former bodybuilder, writer for the Faith and Fitness magazine and bodybuilding.com, and he was also the title holder of Mr. Ontario in early 90s, 1989, 1990. And because there is this awareness now of specifically a lot of freedom podcasters are talking about the 15-minute city agenda of the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. This has been forefront in the minds of many freedom fighters. So without much further ado, let's bring in our special guest for this segment. We don't have a name for this segment, but probably we'll make this a permanent segment on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Sean Maves to the show. Hello, Sean. How are you doing, brother?
Very good. Thanks for having back on the segment. It's a good intro. There's a lot of ground there we need to cover on this one.
Awesome. Well, so yesterday, the previous episode, we were talking about what urban planners, how urban planners work together with the government and how you collaborate with the government and design parcels of lands, areas in the city. Sometimes it could be as big as a 20,000 resident neighborhood. It could be as small as maybe a campus, a university campus size type of area. And how does the mandates on urban planning come from? Are they coming from urban planners who are trained to design cities, or are they coming from the internationalist agenda being passed down from the top to the governments, to the local governments, municipalities, and whatnot? And we started touching a little bit on smart cities, but we haven't touched on the smart cities yet. I asked you at the last time you were on here, I asked you if you notice a trend from ever since you started the first year. You said you became an urban planner in 1989. Did you say?
Yeah, that's right. 89. That's
1989.
Yep.
So my question to you was, from 1989 to up to the present, you're still an urban planner for many years. That's almost 30 years now, right? You've been urban planning for 30 years.
Doing it well. Yeah.
What was the trend? And give us a little bit of a refresher. What is the trend that you are noticing, and what are you smelling? Do you smell anything fishy going on with urban planning?
Well, the trend since the 90s is smart growth. I think I mentioned that in the last segment. Smart growth is basically planning policies that seek to create better neighborhoods. They seek to create a policy framework so you'll get higher development along major transit corridors, along subways and LRT lines and this and that. And in theory, it's supposed to help stop some of the urban sprawl that we've seen in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and use city assets more wisely. So, this is what we're being told. There are now two I'm going to mention about the smart growth. Two of the most highlighted cities that have used smart growth are Portland, Oregon, and Vancouver. Unfortunately, those two have also experienced the highest rise in property values, actually beyond the ability for most to buy real estate. So there's been some unintended consequences of some of the smart growth policies in certain cities. It's driven up housing prices because housing in those cities actually became a commodity when they started to put zoning restrictions on the perimeter of those cities, and they tried to stop some of the sprawl, but it also attracted a lot of developers to buy up properties in the downtown area, build up, and those prices went up. Now, it's not entirely a consequence of the smart growth policy. It's also a consequence of some of the low interest rate environment and so on, why we had this real estate bubble that appears to be starting to burst right now. So, there's that aspect of smart growth. And now we're starting to see, the smart city concept. We're hearing all about it, the 15-minute city, with using all the technology, data collection to analyze and manage assets and so on. And, there's it's good and bad as far as I can tell. I don't know if we want to get into some of the smart city stuff now. Is that Is that what
Yeah,
you want?
well, so that's exactly what I want to do today. If we can get into that, but let me preamble the question with this. When I think of smart cities, we started hearing when when the cell phone became first market affordable, or it become market available for the masses. I think my very first cell phone cost me like $800 because it was one of those Nokia StarTAC. I bought it for my birthday back in '96, and I thought, for my birthday, I'm gonna buy myself because I've been working hard overtime and all that, and I was living alone. I was a single man.
Yeah.
I bought myself I think it's $800 phone, the Nokia StarTAC, and then it soon it soon became old very fast because none of my friends had cell phone. I'm the only one who has cell phone. I got nobody to call and nobody calling me. So, but then after that era passed, now we start seeing now almost everybody has a phone. But then we start hearing about these phones are not anymore just phones. They're called smartphones. And most of them are not even using their smartphones as phones. They're using it for anything else other than a phone. And then after we heard of smartphones, we heard of smart TVs, and then smart cars. And then in the early 90s, we heard of smart meters, so that we can, I guess, the power companies will have a way to monitor how much consumption there is. And then a lot of this series of smart things come. And then now, in my imagination, the reason they come up with a smart city is that everything in that city are just smart cars, smart bikes, everything is smart. And even only people will not stay smart at that point. Tell us a little bit more. My concept of smart cities, is it a little aligned to the real smart city, or tell us a little bit more about smart cities?
Yeah. Well, okay, you said a lot to unpack there. Cities, modern day cities, do require high tech monitoring of water quality, sewage systems, transportation, and so on. So there's no question we need to use the technology. I think some of the concern is with data privacy. When you start to use data from cell phones and so on, and when you start to line the streets full of cameras, like San Diego has 3,000 streetlights with cameras on them. Eight of the most surveyed cities in the world are in China, but two of them are actually, one of them is at Atlanta and the other one's in London, where they have cameras. Seem to have cameras everywhere. So the concern with the smart city is the privacy aspect. We need technology definitely to manage assets, transportation, water quality, sewage, et cetera, et cetera. You need that. But I guess the problem is when you spill over into areas of data privacy. Okay, so this is, I think, where the concern, as far as I'm concerned, that is the problem. I think that we're starting to suspect that perhaps we're getting closer to the day where this could be used against the citizens. If you're a student of the Bible, you know that at some point there will be a one world government, and the Antichrist system will have total control over all world citizens, over movement. If you connect the dots, you would think, well, wouldn't that kind of system require some kind of smart city surveillance system, digital IDs, and all that stuff? So I think that's the concern. We're starting to see signs of developments. There was actually a developer who had a proposal. It was called Toronto Quayside, and they proposed to have this high-tech development down near the waterfront of Toronto, and they were going to use biometric ID systems, robot delivery systems, and things like that. Now the development, they actually canceled the development, but those things could, we might start to see some more of that stuff in the future. I mean, right now Google Maps actually uses cell phone data to map out areas of congestion. If you go on Google Maps and put on the traffic tab, you'll see the lines of the red lines come up where the freeways are jammed. Well, all they're using is locators on cell phones. So they're already, big data, big tech are already using some of this stuff. So I think the concern is will they go too far with it? I don't know if you want to talk about that a little more or not.
Well, let's backtrack a little bit, Sean, and maybe have a little bit more uh, clarity on the definition. What would qualify as a smart city? Because um, even before we heard of smart cities, we already have all of these cameras everywhere, and I think the subway system is run by computers. The traffic lights are run by computers. But how do you cross the line from a conventional city to a smart city? Could you give us a clarity? What is by definition a smart city?
It's a blurry line. I don't know if I can really answer that, because it's been increasing incrementally. Okay, so this is where we're at right now, where these technologies have been used incrementally more and more and more. Okay, so now we're seeing new concepts. This is something that Daniel, in the book of Daniel, Daniel wrote that during the end times that the increase of knowledge would increase and people would go to and fro. But just back up to 1900, the knowledge would increase would double every 50
That's right.
years. Okay, and then fast forward to the 80s, it would double every maybe 2 to 5 years, and now today, knowledge is doubling almost on a weekly basis. So where we're going with this stuff is more, I think, the concern. I don't know when did smart cities start. Like, they started to use whenever the technologies become available, they just use them. So they're just adding on more and more and more. We're just hearing on almost on a monthly basis some new technology that cities are using, and it's just really hard to keep track of all of it. Some of it's very useful. When I go to the mall, I see there's 50 spaces left over in this parking deck. That helps me decide where I want to park my car when I go to Sherway Gardens in the west end of Toronto. So some of this stuff is very useful. When I go hop on the 401, if it says, 4 lanes blocked. I was traveling home from work the other day, four lanes blocked and 400 southbound. Well, that helps me to make a decision. Maybe do I get off at the Finch exit and choose a different way home? So some of this stuff is very useful. So.
Yeah, I think like at Yorkdale Mall, you have this little lights of red and greens. I guess that's part of the systems where if you see you don't know where are the available spots, but if you see a green light on the ceiling, that means that the adjacent or the spot right on the bottom of it is available. So I understand the practical use of it. So do you think that because it's very hard to find a definitive line when we transition from a conventional city to the smart city, and there is a trend that they're doing more and more and more of this technological control of our cities, do you think we'll just wake up one day and we're just fully automated, fully computerized city? Because it's like, the analogy of the frog in a boiling pot kind of. Do you think that's how we are going to transition as smart cities in the future?
Well, I think it's incremental. I think it's incremental. I think some of the plans first of all, COVID. What happened there at COVID actually, I think, accelerated us closer to maybe a place where we don't want to go, where some of the smart technologies could be used against us. I mean, first of all, with the 15-minute city idea, that started in Paris during the COVID lockdown. All of a sudden, everybody were told that we're not supposed to be in our cars and driving around, spreading the virus around. And so all of a sudden, the Paris mayor, Hidalgo, she got a lot of media attention, and they ended up removing half of the city's parking spaces. They added about 100 miles of bike lanes, and they came up with new ways of creatively staying local and so forth. But the technology part of it, we're hearing of some pilot cities. See, what they'll do probably with the smart cities is, first of all, the 15-minute city plans are actually all backed by the UN and WEF. And what they'll probably do is come up with some pilot cities, and they'll do some experimentation. They'll report positively on that, and then they'll try to convince all other cities to follow by the different guidelines for the 15-minute city. So 15-minute city is just a specific smart city that really has good planning practices, but also, unfortunately, seeks to control citizens, control the movement of citizens. You'll be penalized if you travel outside of your district. If anybody watching today, Google Oxfordshire County.
Oxfordshire County.
Oxfordshire County. They have a 15-minute city proposal. It's going to come. They're going to roll this out in 2024, and they're going to separate their city into 6 districts. Okay, so if you live in one district, you will not be allowed to take over 100 trips outside your district, or you'll be fined. And the way they're going to do this is tracking with cameras. So here's some smart city technology that will be used against the citizens. Now this thing hasn't gone through yet, but there was a survey. When people of this county in England found out about this, they did a survey. Only 7% liked it. So, and yet on social media, they're lying about it. They're lying to the citizens that everybody's okay with this, and they're kind of censoring the criticism. So this is my concern, is that there's more pilot cities planned also in 2025. I think there's 5 pilot cities planned for Barcelona, Portland, Melbourne. I forget the other 2. And my concern is that they're going to do these pilot cities where they'll carve up the cities into different districts, and they'll tell everybody, you got to stay in your district. And they'll do some improvements. And there's no question. There's a lot of improvements that the cities are doing at the neighborhood level, which are welcome. But I don't like the surveillance, and I don't like the restrictions that they're proposing. A lot of this stuff isn't really making the mainstream media yet, but we'll see. Have you heard anything about this? Have you heard anything about the 15-minute city and that concept?
Yeah. I've been hearing a lot of 15-minute cities. I think the freedom community are very cognizant with the Trojan horse from behind the 15-minute city. I don't know much about it yet, but we run out of time today. But folks, in the next coming days, we are going to have Sean, our brother in the fight and also brother in the faith, who is an urban planner here in Toronto. There's a lot of opportunity in the next coming days. Please tune in. Don't miss out, because we have a series of episodes here going on where we deep dive with the help of our brother Sean to look into this trend of moving forward to 15-minute city. But I'm very happy with what you shared there. It seems like we're not gonna be sucker punched into a smart city or a 15-minute city. I think we're gonna see it coming, because they're gonna do all of this pilot experiment. Hopefully that they will do that, and hopefully a referendum and a vote and a consultation with the citizens. But that's all the time we have for now. Thank you very much, Sean. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening in. Please don't go away. We'll be right back after this message. Sean, thank you very much. We'll see you again next time.
Thanks again.
Imagine that the power grid was totally wiped by an EMP weapon of an enemy state. Your stress level will go to the roof, your patience will be tried, you will have to think about both your own and your complaining children's survival. If you don't survive, your children won't when they are left on their own. Teach your children how to have the mentality of being survivors through a fun, children-friendly guided outdoor adventures with basic survivor mindfulness integrated in the fun outing activity. Call my friends Ernell and Victoria, who are experienced survivors. Call them at 905-252-8009 or email them at northernpacificcottages@gmail.com. A disturbing news. Doctors administer certain drugs even after the family have rejected it. Why? Because hospitals can charge $3,000 a pop for it. Meanwhile, they hid the fact that cheaper alternatives are available and it only costs cents. Do you know if you are paying the right price for your current prescription? Have you researched if there are cheaper yet equally effective alternatives? Call Shinlaza Pharmaceuticals at 1-800-206-0051 or email at info@shinlaza.com for a free consultation. Shinlaza Pharmaceuticals is owned and operated by a freedom fighter of the freedom community in Ontario.
Welcome back, folks. This is Freedom Fighter Radio. I'm your host, Ordinary Joe. That was Sean Maves, our expert consultant here on our daily segment on the Freedom Fighter Radio. We're going to call it the 15-minute city segment for now until we find an appropriate name for it. But, folks, thank you for tuning in. And we have another panel. We have another segment with a special guest, Diane Doucette, that we are going to bring in a little later. But just sort of like weighing in on what our friend Sean Maves has said there. I think that's exactly what's going to happen in the next few years. This sinister agenda, this dystopian agenda, the way they're going to roll it out, they're not going to force it upon us initially, anyways. Just like you have to remember how it was in the early days of the lockdowns. You know, the stay-at-home orders, the mask everywhere orders. Initially, they don't force it down your throat. Initially, what they do is to make you want to be asked, or they want you to ask the government to impose upon yourself the rule of staying home, the rules of putting diapers on your face. This is how they gaslight humanity. They are going to make you believe that it's you who wants and asks for it. And actually, they will deceive people so that people will be the one asking for it. I think that's what's going to happen with all these 15-minute cities as well. Because right now, it is being touted, being marketed as, a proposition of convenience, just like me and Sean Maves were talking about there in that last part of the segment. There, we were talking about how some of this agenda seems to be useful. Some of this agenda seems to be very convenient, like when you are being guided in a parking lot by some of these smart features of showing you where the vacant spots are, right? So this will be rolled out. This will be imposed upon humanity as a place of convenience. And I had I was going to maybe I can talk about it a little bit right now, but I didn't screenshot this to show you. But there is a website in Ontario called obin.ca. Basically, this is a propaganda website paid by yours. You and I paid for this website. This is a taxpayer funded website, taxpayer funded propaganda called the Ontario Basic Income Network. So this is a leash. This is a trap. This is selling goods for you to grab onto, to feel and believe that your government really cares about you and I. So they are going to offer you some free money. You don't have to work for it. It's free money. But then when you grab onto this, the Ontario Basic Income Network, then you are going to, tomorrow I will be playing their propaganda video for you. But that's how they are going to roll out their propaganda, their tyranny, their capturing our mobility rights. This is how they are going to assault our freedom to move, our freedom to choose, our freedom to buy what we want to buy, or save, or build wealth for ourselves. Because once the digital currency agenda, the social credit score agenda is upon us, they will put an expiry date on those funds, right? Those funds that they give you, there is an expiry date on those. You got to spend it before an expiry date, or else it will just vanish in thin air. There's no way of saving up for the future. There's no way of building wealth for your family. It is all about control. You will be fully controlled when you bite into this bait. So don't bite into it.
And again, they will be rolling this out in the name of convenience, in the name of they care about you, in the name of your safety, of your health. It's all deception, folks. Another guest of ours, or for another segment, because we are going, like I said, the reason we are um, telling you more about this and our special guest are on the next segment. We are going to present a snippet on an interview that I had with Diane Doucette, and she has very poignant insights about the transhuman fourth industrial revolution agenda of again, we will be gaslit, we will be sold, marketed to entering a bio-digital convergence agenda, meaning give up your humanity, allow yourself to be integrated with technology, because it's for your own good, it's for your own advancement, it's science fiction technology that you will be equipped with super eyesight, super hearing, super brains. You will be connected to the internet without a device. You don't need a device. We can plug your brain straight to the internet, and you can download all kinds of information when your brain is directly connected to the internet. But folks, that is a two-way street. If you allow yourselves to be connected to the metaverse, that is a two-way street, which means yes, you will have access on the hive mind, but the hive mind will have access to your brain. So do not fall for this, folks. So again, the theme for our mini series in this next few days and the previous few days that we have been embarking on is the very important quote from the book authored by George Orwell, 1984, where it was stated that he who controls the past controls the future, and those who control the present controls the past. There is a very important key and knowledge to be learned from that quote. So let me introduce our next guest on the next segment. Her name is Diana Doucette. She is one of the most important dissident voices in the province of New Brunswick. She was the very first one to step up, like I said, but she knows how to navigate this war. She is not one of those, although she's one of those early dissenters, she is one of those early responders to stand up and fight for her freedoms. She is not one of those who was early to fall off the wagon or give up on the fight. And she is still fighting right now. She's an active freedom fighter in the province of New Brunswick. Without much further ado, let's welcome in Madam Diana Doucette, who will talk to us about the fourth industrial revolution and the transhuman agenda. Here goes, Madam.
Kind of a world are we in? The fourth industrial revolution? A lot of people think, hey, well, this is the X-Men era, or and they think it will create a lot of superheroes, but there's so much sinister stuff with all this, right? Can you enlighten our listeners, please?
When you merge biology and technology, you take away the ability for human beings to exist just as they are. It's not like today, okay, I'm going to give the example of the transgender, okay? People that work in the institutions of education and all that, nobody is allowed to counter that narrative. You can't say anything, okay? Or you're out of there, right? And parents are criminalized for not going along with and not agreeing. They're criminalized even for not agreeing, and their words are criminalized. Okay, so if you can't say anything about transgenderism without being labeled and even criminalized, and we live in a world where technology is becoming more and more mandatory. We're losing the ability to function outside of the parameters of technology. Then when the inevitable biology and technology starts to merge, then who will stand up to that if people in the professions that are supposed to be there to protect and educate and all that, if they're not allowed to say anything, they won't be allowed to say anything for that either. And this is not just an identity, it is a new entity. It is a new being that where humanity cannot compete with that. So it spells humanity's end if we go down that road. And that's the problem with forced technology. Because in the end, humanity becomes obsolete. They are replacing everything that makes us human and making it obsolete. Now the computer, you don't have to be a good writer anymore. It'll write for you. You don't have to be, we're not going to need drivers. It's going to all drive itself. We don't need, you don't need to have voice actors. You can just use artificial voices, and like everything that we used to be able to do is being sold as it's like a replacement. The technology is taking over and doing it for us in the name of convenience. But the debate is not being had that really it is robbing human beings from the ability to use their creativity, use their minds, use their hands, use what was, gifted to us. If you're a person of faith, what was gifted to us by our Creator, we cannot use it anymore. It is obsolete. So what is your purpose? You have no purpose.
Mm-hmm.
The machine becomes the deity of the world. And humanity becomes obsolete, gone.
There you go, folks. That was Diane Doucette, our friend, freedom fighter from the province of New Brunswick. That is an important sharing that she gave with us. She gave for us here. So a lot. It is important that we are able to zoom in and zoom out, the future and the past, to understand the present. And most freedom fighters are doing it the other way around. Most freedom fighters are being stressed by the day-to-day, everyday, present news cycle, and it's like being gone with the wind, and it's very stressful. Like the, am I coming across clear? Okay, I can see the indicator that you can hear me. Yeah, just like the analogy that I gave yesterday, how people who are investing in the stock market and they follow their stocks on a day-to-day basis, that causes a lot of unnecessary stress, because the market will always go up and down, and our fight for freedom would always also be go up and down. Some days it looks like the tyrants are winning, and some days we look like we're winning. Some days the tyrants and the technocrats looks like they're failing, but some days they look like they're moving their advances against us successfully. But we need not be stressed by that, because we need to know that the war has already been won. If you are a believer in Christ, if you are a Christian freedom fighter, you know how this movie ends. And it has been played many times in history, and it will be played again in the future. But if you have the assurance, you know that we need to be on our toes, we need to be aware, we need to be cognizant of what's going on our surroundings, but we need not to be stressed by it, because we know that the war has already been won. So some of this futuristic dystopian agenda can be traced back if we learn the lesson of history. So for example, some of this 15-minute city, smart city agenda, where they try to corral us into this 15-minute open air prisons, 15-minute open air concentration camps. We need to understand what happened during the first, the second, and third industrial revolutions, right? If we have a good grasp of the lessons of history,
we will be able to alleviate their agenda, their dystopian agenda of our future. And when we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, this transhuman agenda, right now, the way they're packaging this so that people will the people will not resist. The people will not push back against this agenda because they will feel that they want it. They will need it. But you need to open your eyes. We need to open our eyes that we have been gaslit to this place in history for us to be deceived to think that we want it. So and I will close with this because there's so much more to talk about this topic, but we're running out of time and I'm running out of breath here. But we're just scratching the surface, and I only discussed maybe 2% of what I intend to discuss with you today. So some of the things that we are going to talk about tomorrow, we are going to talk about the OBIN.ca agenda, the Ontario Basic Income Network. We're also going to talk about the psychic staring effect. These are some human phenomenon because a lot of our listeners probably don't believe in the fourth dimension. In my opinion, the fourth dimension is not time. And actually, a mathematician that we guested on the show have also agreed with me, and he's not even Christian. He's not even an atheist. He thinks that atheist. He says that he's an agnostic, pretty much. He's a mathematician and a what does he call his name? Oh yeah, he called himself as a logician. He's a logician. So he doesn't agree with my Christian beliefs, right? But he agrees with me that the fourth dimension is not time. You know how in Einstein's theory of relativity that the first dimension is a point, then the second dimension is a line, the third dimension is a plane, and the fourth dimension is time. He does not agree with that, and he's a logician and he's a successful mathematician, right? He believes that time preceded the first 3 dimensions, and I agree with him. Although we don't agree with the fourth dimension, my contention from the theological perspective, the fourth dimension is the spiritual realm and the spiritual dimension. That is my contention. His contention is something else. He believed that the time precedes the first, second, and third dimension. I believe that the fourth dimension is the spiritual realm. And I have, in the next coming days, I'm going to discuss why I believe that the fourth dimension is the spiritual realm. And there are actually many scientific bases on why I believe that. Some of the things that I'm going to be discussing with you, you can do a pre-research before our episode tomorrow. Actually, we are going to skip out on the daily Freedom Fighter broadcast tomorrow because we have a special guest. That will be Chris Kai, the candidate for mayorship, who is a brother in the fight. He is a freedom fighter, one of the earliest, but still fighting right now with a fight here in Toronto. He is running for mayor of Toronto. Chris Kai will be our special guest. His real name is Christopher Sakosha. He's actually married to a Filipino freedom fighter as well. So that will be one of the things some of the questions I'm gonna ask him tomorrow. And he's a big supporter of the police force, even though many elements of the police, members of the police community, is been arresting him because of the many tickets that he has during the COVID lockdowns. But I fully endorse Chris Kai or Christopher Sakosha, and I believe he's the only candidate that will help the people of Toronto win their cities back away from the tyrants, the technocrats, the internationalists, the social engineers. So that is our special guest tomorrow night, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we are not going to have this regular daily radio style show tomorrow, but we are going to pick up on this on Thursday. We are, and on Thursday, I'll be talking about some of the phenomena, scientifically proven phenomena that I believe is a some of the stepping stone. What's the word I'm looking for? Some of the early introduction to my contention, which the fourth dimension is the spiritual world. So some of these phenomena, you can Wikipedia this, and it's not an endorsement of Wikipedia, but at least get some of the basics of these concepts. This first one that I'll be discussing on Thursday is a concept called psychic staring effect. We'll talk about that because science cannot explain this, but science acknowledges that this is a real phenomenon. And even some scientists and the intelligence community think that there is validity on the telepathic abilities of humans. Telepathic abilities have been explored by the CIA during the Cold War, and they call it the remote viewing project, right? But the psychic staring effect, this is basically when somebody is staring at someone and they're staring it from behind or from a distance. For some reason, even though the subject who is being stared at, even though they don't know that they are being stared at, somehow there is some sort of extrasensory or subconscious notification that they are being stared at, and then usually, and it's not the same for every subject, but most humans that are being stared at, they feel a subconscious notification that they are being stared at, and they start looking around and actually kind of detect where the staring is coming from, even though there's no conscious evidence to let them know that they are being stared at. This is called the psychic staring effect. We'll talk about that. The reason I want to talk about that is because we're talking about time, right? The elements of time, how the those who control the past controls the future, those who control the present controls the past. There are some phenomena even in the animal kingdom where animals are known to be many species of animals. Even the National Geographic has an article about this, how in history some of the animals they observe, animals including rats, snakes, weasels, during the days before the earthquake in 373 BC. Historians have recorded that animals including rats, snakes, and weasels deserted the Greek city of Hellas in droves just days before a devastating earthquake. So animals seems to have a sense of an earthquake or a disaster about to come. And how do they know this? I think this is part of a spiritual dimension that I'm going to talk about on Thursday, right? And other things. So I'm also going to talk about Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock. These two have teamed together, and they're not Christians again, but they are putting a lot of holes in this humanistic narratives, trying to this pokes a hole the findings and the research of Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson, although they both deny the power of Christ. They don't believe in the deity of Christ. This is not something that they put forth, but many of their findings are poking a lot of holes in the Darwinian theory of evolution. So we are going to discuss that also on Thursday. Their findings, especially their study of the new megalith finding called Göbekli Tepe, right? And many of the megaliths that have been unearthed in Peru, many megaliths in Soviet Russia, actually. Well, they're not Soviet anymore. And in China, many of these, do you know that there are more pyramids in China than there are pyramids in Egypt? Many of these archaeological finds tells us a lot of lesson of history, but they're also pointing to what is to happen in the future. Folks, you've been listening to the Freedom Fighter Radio. I'm your host. Thank you for tuning in today. We'll see you again on Thursday for the daily Freedom Fighter Radio broadcast. But tomorrow, again, a special broadcast with our special guest, Chris Guy, the chief freedom fighter for many freedom fighters in Toronto. He'll be our special guest tomorrow. He is running for the mayorship seat of Toronto. I'm your host, Ordinary Joe. This has been Freedom Fighter Radio Tuesday. Today is May 23rd, 2023. We'll see you again on Thursday for the daily radio show. And we'll see you tomorrow night for our special guest, Chris Guy, on the Freedom Fighter Radio, only here on the Ordinary Joe. God bless you all. Share. And we'll see you tomorrow. God bless. Have a good night, everybody.
We have a brand new podcast in collaboration with one of our very important collaborators. So without much further ado, I would like to introduce our main collaborator for a brand new podcast, Enemies of the State, the New World Order. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Goru Gordon.
Yes, and to put it simply, the recipe is always there. Create a crisis. You have to present there is a crisis in society. In order for the state to go bigger and to grow, you always have to threaten people or to instill fear. You have to be fearful of greedy capitalists or the greedy businessman who wants to take money away from you.
Canadians all across the country are sick and tired of the lies, the fear-mongering, and the hate speech they hear from the mainstream media. Download the free radio app, Freedom Fighter Radio. Click the link below, scan our QR code, join our mailing list, and get a free download of our Freedom Fighter Radio app, only here on OJTV on The Ordinary Joe Show.
Please consider supporting the OJTV production costs and be an insider member for only $3 a month. Go to patreon.com/OJTV Canada. Thank you for your continued support.
Hello, friends. I am Derek Sloan, the leader of the Ontario Party. You are listening to the Freedom Fighter Radio Canada podcast, only here on The Ordinary Joe Show.